Hello, this is John Carter, Crofton Police Department. A dime is thin, but it has two sides. And since there's so many rumors and misinformation about my involvement in certain things that have transpired over the last several months in this town, I decided to explain my part. And so you can hear from my perspective of the things that have been going on. Since you're only hearing information from one or two sources, but not from me, because no one's calling me to ask me about anything, I'm going to take this opportunity to share my information from my perspective with you about the things that have gone on. Let's go back to how it all got started. Bob Evans and Larry Pikes wanted Cheryl Lawhead investigated before she left office. They wanted to ensure that when they took over, that all the books and things were in order and that nothing that had happened that was or could have been considered as nefarious would come back on them. I suggested that in order to do that, they simply hire an accountant, get them to sit with the treasurer if they hire one, or the city clerk for 5 or 6 days, and just do a transfer of the power in the books. Better yet, they probably should sit with Lawhead in the last week or 2 weeks that she was here and do a peaceful transition of power and find out what was going on in the office. No one wanted to do that. Lawhead did invite them to come and sit with her to find out what was going on in the office, but they frankly refused. I was directed to conduct a criminal investigation if the audit that they found turned up information that Lawhead had been less than honest during her tenure as mayor for the city of Crofton, because they didn't want to have a repeat of things that had happened in the past. So Larry Pikes and Bob Evans hired Frank and Associates to come in and do the audit. They had asked me if I knew of anyone that could possibly do the audit because they had trouble finding someone to come in during the holidays, and in between November and spring, usually May, it is really difficult to find accountants because they're busy with their own customers. I gave them a couple of recommendations that people that I knew that may talk to them, but I knew they wouldn't be available. But they came up with Frank Hayes and Associates, which did provide someone to come. Although the person who came was not an actual accountant, he was someone who came to conduct the investigation. Pikes directed me that whatever that guy needed from Frank Hayes and Associates to be comfortable was to provide it for him. And that guy eventually contacted me about hotels in the area. He didn't want to stay in Norfolk because it was too far. He didn't want to stay at Lewis and Clark because he said he looked them up and it didn't seem to be somewhere where he would be very comfortable, and they had very few amenities for him. But he did say that he found a Holiday Inn in Yankton and asked if we can make those arrangements for him to stay there. I did. I called, made the arrangements for him as Pikes had directed me to do. And on the day that he was supposed to check in, the folks at the Holiday Inn wanted the credit card that was used to make the reservation to be at the counter so they can put their incidentals on it if there were any incidentals. The guy who was there, I believe his name was Jeremy. I'm not sure. I don't remember what his name was. But anyway, he instructed me that all of the cost would be sent back to his company because they had to still be paid for per diem and fuel and time and other things other than just him doing the audit. So all that would be billed to the city at the same time. So I went there, gave the lady at the hotel desk the card. She ran it, and they were going to pay using the city's invoice when everything was settled out and finally done. But that's not what happened, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Donna, the city clerk, and Chantel Tramp called me a few months later, and Donna had said that there was an $800 charge to a hotel in Texas. And I asked her, well, who stayed at a hotel in Texas? She said, you did. I had not gone to a hotel in Texas in November. This happened back in November. And I asked Sergeant Miller, who was from Texas, if he went to Texas in November and stayed at a hotel. He did not. And when he goes to Texas, he stays with his mother who lives there. When I go to Texas, I stay with my family. My sons and daughters live in Texas. I don't stay in hotels when I go to Texas. In any case, they were emphatic Bob Evans and Larry Pikes wanted me to come down to the office and talk to them about this hotel stay in Texas. And I emphatically denied knowing anything about it and suggested that maybe it was a fraudulent charge. At some point subsequent to that, the state auditor came in to do their audit and found that the actual charge that they were talking about was in Yankton, South Dakota, and it was the guy who from Hayes and Associates who had stayed at the hotel. They had not, in fact, put everything on one bill and billed it to the city, but in fact, what he did is that he went on and left that hotel charge on the card. But of course, since I didn't stay at the hotel, or no one from the city did, when he checked out, they gave him the receipt and he took it back to Omaha or Lincoln or wherever his office is. That's where he took it. So none of us had it. The interesting thing is that when the bill came, if there was any question about it at all, they paid it. The clerk paid it and the city council approved it. No one asked any questions until later, months later, when this whole thing started, when Bob Evans decided that he was going to get rid of the police officers here in town. So the state auditor, when they came, they conspired with the city here to defame my character. I've never seen a state audit report that talked about an individual who had done something. Normally, a state audit report make recommendations to a city or to a county or whatever of what they're doing that can be improved, or what they are doing that's great and they should continue it. So they give recommendations for improvement, or they tell the folks that they're doing a great job. But I've never seen one that impugns the character of any individual or in any individual employee or person who works at that place. Well, this one did. And when I called the auditor's office and asked them about the whole statement that they made, that from what I understand, James Murphy is going around showing people the audited report, remember that the information in that report was based on a lie. It was based on mischaracterization. And the way that the auditor wrote it up, and from what I understand when talking to them, they went back to the city and asked them if there's anything in this report that you want to correct or take out that should not be here. And the city refused. They said, nope, just leave it exactly the way it is. And it was published in that way. Now, I have since filed a formal complaint with the state auditor, and there are other legal remedies that I'm seeking against them for them defaming my character and putting me in a false negative light. That I will pursue on my own later, because those things should not have been done. Then Bob Evans ordered me to fire Sergeant Miller. And how this whole thing really got started is because Bob Evans wanted me to fire Sergeant Miller because he said that his daughter was crushed and offended by the way Miller spoke to her about a friend of hers. This started when a 36-year-old sex offender was trying to pick up and date and take out on a county road to drink and have sex with a 15-year-old girl here in Crofton. And when this guy was accosting this girl night after night for about 8 to 10 days, he kept going to the subway there next to Lewis and Clark for a straight week, almost night after night, waiting for her after 9 o'clock at night for her to get off and trying to convince her to go sit with him on the county road and have a few drinks. When the staff reported this, the teenagers there that were working reported this to Evans's daughter, she did nothing about it. And after a while, the teenagers and the young girl who was creeped out by this guy reported it to Sergeant Miller. Sergeant Miller contacted the individual and he warned him that while he could not ban him from being at the store, because that's the store owner's, the manager's job, he told him that he can come and he can buy sandwiches, he can sit there, he can do whatever, but do not continue to stalk, bother, or harass this 15-year-old girl and try to convince her to go out on the county road and drink and have sex with him. Miller explained to him that if he continued to conduct, especially with him being a sex offender, and the girl had made a formal complaint that there was unwanted conduct and an unwanted following of her, that he would most likely be arrested for stalking. The gentleman apparently expressed what Miller had said to Evans's daughter. She became offended because of her relationship with this man. She told her dad, Evans, that she thought that Miller had said and did something that was really condescending to her, and he was disrespectful to her friend, and Evans came to me and demanded that Miller be fired for disrespecting his daughter. Miller, when he was contacted about it, said that he believed that the mayor was improperly using his office in order to accomplish a goal that shouldn't be accomplished, because his daughter's feelings had nothing to do with the mayor doing his job or Miller performing his job and keeping a 15-year-old girl from possibly being assaulted by a sex offender who's 36 years old. What Evans' daughter said and what Bob Evans confirmed was there's nothing wrong with men trying to pick up women. It's a natural thing for men to try to pick up and date women and shoot their best shot to see if they can get to know them better. But not if she's 15 and he's a 36-year-old sex offender. Are you kidding me? Now, I know that the world and society has just gone crazy and trying to sexualize children and trying to get them to do all kinds of perverted things. They can go do that in Compton. They can go do that in Omaha. They can go do that in San Francisco. They can go do that in Florida or wherever else. But you're not going to do that here in Crofton. Not while I'm here as chief of police. And that's what I think a lot of this is all about. Because we are not going to stand by and let grown men date young girls, children, and to sexualize them on county roads while they're having drinks. And you think that that is a natural thing to happen? And you think that you want, and you're going to be around other children in the fall? I will watch you like a hawk. And I will talk to these teenagers and find out what's going on. Because if I find out that there are grown men having sex with children in Crofton, there will be consequences to pay. I guarantee you that. And I don't need a patch on my sleeve or a badge on my chest to accomplish that goal. And I'm going to let you know that right now, emphatically. As long as I'm black, and that's going to be forever, a grown man will never have sexual relations with a child in Crofton and get away with it against her will, especially under the influence of alcoholic liquor or drugs. That's wrong. I don't care whose book you look in, that's wrong. And we're not going to tolerate it. So, it went from that incident when I refused to fire Miller over that. I thought Miller was doing his job, to Bob Evans met with me and said, well, he met with the city council. He met with several business people in the community, and they said Miller was not a good fit for the community. I investigated that, found that not to be credible. It went from that to the city doesn't have enough money to pay for 2 officers anymore. And Miller was supposed to be here just on a grant. Well, I called Senator DeKay and called some folks at the State Crime Commission and tried to get money, which I have been reasonably successful in getting some money in here to pay for things. Now, James Murphy, along with a couple other council members, Ben Pikes and Evans, feel like that I should be responsible for raising the money for my salary, Miller's salary, the radios, the cameras, the body cameras, the radars, the vehicles, everything that we need for public safety in this town. It's my responsibility as the chief to do it. And if I can't come up with that money, then we can't be here. So does that make sense? Truly, is the cost of public safety of this town solely my responsibility? Are we going to protect the public by grants only? I don't think that that's the way that that works. It is the city council's responsibility to come up with ways to provide the public safety for this town. And it's usually through tax incentives and other ways. I do agree that there are incentives in grants and other things that can enhance the safety of this town and equipment and law enforcement presence, but it's not solely my responsibility as the chief. That's not a part of my job description to raise money for myself to work here, nor for other officers to work here, nor for the equipment that we use. But I, as a courtesy, because of what I've known and have done in the past, have offered those services to bring in more money. But now all of a sudden that gets turned on me. It seems like every good deed that I've tried to do came out bad or for the worse. So all of these failures, it seems that Pikes and Murphy and Evans have gotten together, and the two of them have convinced Murphy that I'm the problem. He's drank the Kool-Aid. And with this audit report, this misinformation and malicious lies that somehow I was responsible for the $20,000 that the city paid for an audit report is my fault. It was not my fault. It was members of the city council that arranged and approved that investigative audit to be done. Much of it against my recommendations when they asked me what should be done. That's not being talked about. I suggested a completely different approach that they should take to keep things just good, where everybody stayed in a good relationship. Murphy initially didn't want anything to do with it at all because he knew that it was a witch hunt. And he, doing the right thing in his mind, just stayed out of it, which at the time, that was probably the most prudent thing that he could do. While the mayor does have the option to appoint or replace a police chief, you can't do it for unlawful reasons or purposes. Discrimination is unlawful. And Evans has stated from the very beginning that having two officers of color at the top, his constituents thought was just too much. And it was his responsibility to his constituency to lighten up Crofton, because that's what he wanted them to do. Well, I hate to inform you, but based on my nearly short year here, I do not believe that the majority of the people in this town are racist. I just haven't seen it. Now, I was born and raised in Mobile, Alabama. And let me tell you, I know racists when I see them. And I don't see a lot of them in Crofton. Now, I know there are a few of them here. But the question is who are you really representing? Because if it's that handful and you are pushing their agenda, then that's problematic. Because an elected official has got to be able to represent the entire community, no matter what a person looks like, no matter where they're from, no matter who they choose to love. You have to be able to represent people equally everywhere in this town. With that said, the sheriff and others have indicated that Evans told them that the reason he is uncomfortable with talking to Miller and myself is that we filed a lawsuit against him. I, nor Sergeant Miller, have filed a lawsuit against Bob Evans or anyone else on the council as far as that goes. No one's been sued. I have not filed a lawsuit against Evans. Miller has not filed a lawsuit against Evans. No one's filed a lawsuit against anyone. That's a lie. It's not true. And if there is a lawsuit filed, then what is the case caption? What is the docket number? What is the case number? What court is it filed in? Please ask for that information the next time you're told that, well, they've sued me. No one's been sued at this time. Now, there have been inquiries about things that have been going on, but no one's been sued. I just thought I would share this to straighten out some misconceptions, because if you want to know something about me, maybe you should come ask me. I've been trying to talk to these guys since I've gotten here. Before they took office, before they swore in, I heard from Larry Pikes almost on a weekly basis. Bob Evans, not so much, just every now and then. But now I don't hear from either one of them ever. No one talks to me about anything. I do know that every attempt that we've had, that my wife and I have tried to buy a house here in Crofton, it has been blocked by people on that council. I know emphatically for it to be true that there's an individual on the council that went to folks who we put offers in on property here and told them not to sell us property in this town because they don't want us in this town. Now that is a fact. If you need to talk to me, come see me. Don't listen to the vicious rumors. Come talk to me.